Title: The Zombie King's Domestic Cat. Author: Metasequoia. Copywriting: Zombies are rampant in the last days, what can a cat do? Fang He reborn. The cat, holding the dried fish and thinking about Mouse, hung seriously. In the middle of the night, I used a cat's paw to draw a blood-red decree on the wall. I thought that the shovel officer would prepare endless supplies and dried fish. Who would have thought that the shovel officer would become a zombie on the first day? Fang He first reacted to escape. Don't slap my tail, don't scratch my ears, or chin. Hulia Lu, don't forget your stomach. One main recipient, Sweet Pet 2 space, transformation content tag, rebirth, end time farming, sweet text search keywords, protagonist, Fang He, Li Zhen supporting role others, gold medal editor's recommendation, Fang He, who was trapped in the laboratory in the 13th year of the apocalypse, turned into a 2-month-old little milk cat after his death, returning to the first 3 days of the apocalypse. Knowing that the end of the world is coming, Fang He decided to remind his owner Li Zhen to pick him up in good faith. For example, he painted a blood-red decree on the wall late at night as a warning and asked Li Zhen to prepare supplies in advance. Who would have thought that Li Zhen would be there on the first day of the end after the zombies, sometimes insight into the opportunities and sometimes rigid heads. Since then, the little milk cat, who has not been involved in the world, has been through the difficult cat life of collecting supplies, stopping Li Zhen from eating people, and trying to get him to regain consciousness and humanity. The plot of this article is tightly developed and the setting is novel. As a cat, Fang He needs to collect supplies and take care of the zombie Li Zhen. The reversal of the identity of pets and owners is a major highlight of this article. Although the male protagonist Li Zhen has rigid consciousness, he still does not forget to reserve small dried fish for the kittens. His love for pets is beyond words. The interactive development of one person and one cat is very interesting. This is not only a tense eschatological essay, but also a heartwarming sweet pet story. Fang He was awakened by the coldness of the rain. He moved his body with difficulty. He felt that he didn't have much strength. He barely opened his eyes and saw a huge dark round object. It seemed that he was not alone. At the place where he was fighting mutant zombies, Fang He blinked his eyes hard, feeling that the environment under the rain curtain seemed a bit wrong. After a closer look, Fang He was completely dull. It seemed to be an open-air parking lot. Apart from the visual angle a bit wrong, it was exactly the scene he had seen when he was a child. After 13 years of the last days, the scene was so far away that he almost didn't remember it. But he still knew what was in front of him. The black ones were the tires, but how could there be such a huge tire? Fang He struggled to stand up under the rain curtain, but the strange touch of his limbs made him lower his head. He paused for a while looking at the wet short-haired claws in the standing water. Before Fang He could figure out the situation, the surrounding rain screen suddenly stopped, and then his body suddenly hung in the air. The back of his head was picked up. A warm finger pressed on his chest. After a while, a low voice sounded. Ling Hung didn't die like this. Then, Fang He saw a pair of dim glasses and a tall nose. Before he could see the man's overall face, the car door next to him was opened, and Fang He was cracked by the man to open a tissue box and stuff it. Went in. Although the paper towel quickly absorbed a lot of rain from Fang He's body, Fang He was still cold. Fortunately, after this person got in the car, he turned on the warm air, and Fang He would not be frozen to death again just after being solved by the zombie. Fang Hichuan's cold body was speechlessly certain. He actually came back from the dead. Sadly, he turned into a weak, furry little animal, actually not as big as a tissue box. Hamster? My neighbor Totoro? Squirrel? Fang He moved his paws with difficulty, and when he saw the delicate plum-shaped mat cushion and the retractable barbs on his paws, he was sure that he might be a kitten now. Fang He stretched his paws in the tissue box for a long time, and finally accepted the facts with difficulty. Faced with such a weak body, Fang He was thinking about the lazy cat in the future and decided to come out to please those who rescued the small animals in the rainstorm. A caring person may be the owner of his survival in the future. Fang He gathered enough strength, slowly poking his head out of the tissue box, staring at the driver with a pair of faint eyes. Although this man is handsome, he is really cold. The faint thin lips squeezed rigorously, looking a little unhumanly indifferent. Compared with those thin lips, the sharp eyes behind those glasses were like a knife. Fang He was taken aback. It is hard to imagine that the warm fingertips that just pressed on his chest really belonged to this person. At first glance, he was a bad person. Fang He curled up in entanglement. He was very spineless and temporarily gave up the idea of pleasing him. If he can't deal with this person and throw him into the rain, he will die. Still waiting for this person to send him away, this is really not like a person who can keep pets. Fang He scratched down the tissue box sadly. Li Zhen glanced at the wet kitten while driving, shucking a little head out of the tissue box, staring at him with faint eyes. The cat paws against the edge of the box, and the little tail sticks out. He looked completely alert. If it weren't for the whole body is still a little wet, it is estimated that the cat's fur is standing up. The corners of Li Zhen's mouth moved slightly, and a smile was raised. The kitten suddenly retracted as if shocked. Li Zhen's lips slowly fell back. Perhaps it was due to the industry. The case he took over every day was not. If it's a small number, there are naturally a lot of victims' corpses, so Li Zhen has never been very fond of small animals, especially some spiritual pets, which will obviously be a little afraid of him. It is estimated that in the eyes of these little animals, the blood of justice is also bloody. Taking advantage of the red light at the crossroads, Li Zhen glanced at the kitten that was shrunk in the tissue box and stopped moving. Forget it, it was not destined to be able to keep a pet. When the weather is better, he will send it to the pet shop. Fang He tangled in the tissue box for a long time, and finally fell asleep with weakness. When he woke up again, he was awakened. Fang He opened his eyes and saw the person pressing his hind legs. He used a surgical scissors to cut off the short hairs on his hind legs, and then pierced a long needle into him. In the hind paws. Fang He reflexively began to struggle fiercely, but he was wrapped in a towel, and the palm of his hind leg was very large. Even if he was pressed lightly, Fang He couldn't move. The half-needle stuff was injected into his body. Fang He was in a daze, his damp tail was lightly slapped, the strange feeling made Fang He dull, and his head was also rubbed. Fang He felt in a daze. This is no longer the laboratory that studies virus antibodies, and the seemingly indifferent person in front of him comforted him. After comforting the frightened kitten, Li Zhen found a bottle of alcohol, rubbed the kitten's whole body up and down quickly, and put it in warm water. Apart from the initial struggle, the kitten cooperated with him. Rubbing, Li Zhen was surprised. When he took the kitten out of the warm water, Li Zhen hurriedly wrapped him in a towel, found the hair dryer, and turned on the small wind to dry the kitten's short hair. The blow-dried kitten is unexpectedly handsome. The hair on the head and back is black, the soft belly and limbs are white, and there is a small piece of white short hair in the middle of the forehead, which is lined with bioe. Li Zhen raised his eyebrows slightly. Finally feeling comfortable all over, Fang He's stomach snored uncontrollably, and he raised his paws to touch his stomach uncomfortably, and Fang He looked at Li Zhen with some eagerness. Li Zhen was instantly conquered by the cat's staring green eyes. He stretched out his hand and stroked the kitten's back, directly from the head to the tip of the small tail. His hand was too big and the kitten was obviously too small, not enough. A handful of them, the soft and warm touch of the short-haired kitten made Li Zhen sigh in his heart. It would be more comfortable if he grew up and gained weight, but he glanced at the kitten's body that evades like exploded hair. Li Zhengong's thoughts on breeding were once again stranded. Fang He's cat, who was touched by such a tiger, is not good. No one has been so close to him in more than 10 years. This strange feeling made Fang He Mao stand up, and his claws on the table were sharp. The barb stretched out nervously. After taking precautions for a while, Fang He saw the seemingly indifferent person turned and walked towards the refrigerator. Fang He sat on the table honestly, his tail flicked unconsciously, and Bai Yu's eyes stared at the person tightly and opened. In the refrigerator, Fang He felt his stomach snoring louder. There must be nothing in Li Zhen's family for cats to eat. After all, he has never had a pet. He rummaged the refrigerator and only found a few packets of small yellow croaker he bought when his old sister lived here. Yes, his old sister is very picky after she is pregnant. The products are carefully selected. The taste is not heavy, but the taste is good. It is estimated that the kitten should like it. However, Li Zhen looked back at the kitten's small body, frowned slightly, and took out his mobile phone to check. Obviously, it is not suitable for such a kitten less than 2 months old to eat dried fish directly. Li Zhen frowned and put away his mobile phone, carrying the package of dried small fish around in the kitchen, unpacking the dried small fish and throwing it into the cooking machine, and directly beaten it into fish floss. He just found a plate. Put the fish floss in, and looking back, the kitten had already rubbed against the table, tilted his head and stared at him, the plate in his hand. Li Zhen gave a chuckle, and stretched out his hand to scratch the kitten's chin. Fang He, who stared at the plate, naturally did not see Li Zhen's smile, and he did not even notice Li Zhen's laugh, but the hand on his chin made Fang He tremble, and the cat's paw almost greeted him and moved patiently. Backed up a bit, it's enough to endure this kind of teasing for the sake of the fish. Li Zhen put away his smile, and handed over the plate containing the homemade fish floss. Fang He had been drooling a long time ago, and originally wanted to hold it back, but the taste of fish floss stimulated his taste buds, and Fang He rushed over, reaching into the plate, opening his mouth and eating. Fang He almost burst into tears. Snoring while eating, Fang He, who has never eaten fish in the 13 years of the last days, can't wait to swallow his tongue. Life is not as good as being born to a cat. Fang He's little entanglement about being reborn as a cat disappeared under this delicious fish floss. Li Zhen looked at the bitter kitten, his fluffy head swayed slightly, his neck slightly stretched, a pair of white furry paws were placed outside the plate, and he even snored while eating. Zhen turned around and found a small plate, poured some water and pushed it over. Fang He ate a plate of dried fish floss. He drank some water and felt his whole body warmed up. The cat's beard was uncomfortable with the fish floss. Fang He stretched out his tongue and licked his mouth. He took a long look at the paper towel over there, then looked down at his plum blossom-shaped little paw, tangled for a while. The appointed person rubbed his mouth and beard indiscriminately, and his paw rubbed it for a while. Fang He felt quite pretty. Easy to use. Finally comfortable, Fang He's entire cat lay on the table comfortably, his eyes stunned and unable to open. He glanced at the person in Yan Wang's face. Fang He tangled for a while and fell asleep. Before falling asleep, Fang He thought in a daze, well, this is a good person. If there is such a small dried fish every day, even if this person has a cold face, it can be tolerated. Looking at the fluffy ball on the table, the white furry paws bent slightly inward, the head rested on the furry paws, and the kitten making a slight snoring noise. Li vibrated the corners of his mouth and touched his hands uncontrollably. The soft and silky touch of the kitten's back is very comfortable, and I can't help but touch it again and again. His old sister once said that licking a cat is a thing that can relieve tension, and it is true. Just like this twice, Li Zhen, who has been busy with work for a day, feels a lot easier. I really feel a little bit reluctant to do so. A little thing. When Fang He opened his eyes again, he felt that the place where he was lying on his stomach was a bit wrong. He raised his head and took a look. No wonder, he was now hugged on his knees by his savior. Although the face is not easy to touch, but I have to say that this person is still very attractive when working. A pair of sword eyebrows are slightly locked, the deep eyes behind the glasses have a fierce momentum, and the thin lips are even more pressed. It's tight. A serious man, really handsome, Thinking of the dried fish that this person gave, Fang He felt that he was a good person with a cold face and kindness. Fang He looked at it for a while, and saw that this person's lips suddenly evoked a cold smile. Although it was still not easy to get close to, it seemed softer than the expressionless Yan Wang's face. Fang He turned curiously. I turned my head to see what this person was busy with on the computer. The scene into the target made Fang He's cat blow up. Baihu's eyes were wide, and he suddenly jumped out of Li Zhen's leg. His balance needs to be improved. Fang He landed unsteadily in a panic, and rolled around on the floor before hiding under the side coffee table. Fang He has experienced the apocalypse and has a lot of suspicion about human nature. What he saw on the computer at this time made him instantly guard against the man in front of him. This person with the face of the Yan Wang could be so. In-depth study of the broken corpse pictures and high-definition zoom display? Fang He, who was only 8 years old when the last life erupted in the last life, has learned limited things, coupled with the lack of memory, and can't remember that there is still a profession in the world that requires special detailed study of various corpses, whether whole or half, individual or piecemeal. Li Zhen was interrupted by the sudden movement of the cat. He lowered his head and saw that the cat was already hiding under the coffee table. The little tail was exposed. It seemed to be shaking. Li Zhen frowned slightly, turned his head to look at his computer with some suspicion, and the corners of his mouth moved. Could this kitten be frightened by the pictures of the cases on the computer? The case that Li Zhen took over recently was a dismemberment case. Someone recently reported that the fragmented bodies of several women were found in a garbage disposal center, an undeveloped back mountain in the scenic spot, and a dilapidated old house. For this case, Li Zhen has been busy for many days. He has only recently assembled the bodies of several women, and after identification, the identities of several women have been determined. However, analyzing the characteristics of the corpse and finding the murderer from the corpse requires him to continue his research. Reaching out and touching the kitten's tail outside the coffee table, Li Zhen felt helpless. Even if these elves fear him because of his professional instincts, as a well-known forensic doctor in the city council, Li Zhen is actually a workaholic, so, Li Zhen could only once again determine that he had no relationship with the cute pet, and then turned to continue to study the case pictures. The tail being touched is an extremely strange thing, but people do not have a tail. Fang He felt the whole cat tremble, and suddenly retracted his tail, and ran from one side of the coffee table to the other, poking out his small head slightly, his jasper-like eyes staring at that. People. Isn't this man a perverted murderer, and he especially likes to take pictures after dismembering the body, and put it in the computer to zoom in and appreciate it. After being touched by such a pair of hands, Fang He felt that the whole cat was a bit creepy. Fang He shrank under the coffee table. While watching the person's reaction, he wanted to escape from this place. After looking around, he found that the layout of the room was quite simple. A whole row of bookshelves were filled with books. The coffee table he was on was next to the bookshelf, next to a single sofa with the person sitting on it, and on the other side was a desk and a revolving chair, and the door was not far away, but it was closed now. Fang He looked at the window, the curtains were pulled, and he didn't know if the windows at the back were closed. Anyway, Fang He decided to take a look and talk about it. Fang He quietly slipped past the coffee table and approached the window quietly. Although it was strange to land on all fours, Fang He had to feel that the soft cushion of the cat's paw was simply not working, and it fell on the wooden floor. There was no sound at all. Fang He is now adapting well. Looking at the windows that are not too high, Fang He feels that he should be able to hit a hit. Li Zhen looked at the gap between the documents, and he looked up and saw the little hairy dumpling approaching the window. He raised his eyebrows and took a sip of coffee. Fang He heard the movement behind him, the cat's fur was about to explode, and he rushed towards the window. However, the reality was cruel, thinking that Fang He, the kitten escaping from the window, was knocked down by reality, and the window looked like not high, but it's a pity that the kitten can't jump up. It can be said that the cat's paw can't even reach the edge of the window. Li Zhen smiled at the corner of his mouth for a while, shook his head, and continued to look at the file. Fang He glanced behind him and found that the person was still looking at the computer with his head down. Fang He's cat licked the corner of his mouth with his tongue, and continued to pounce on the window strenuously. Over there, Li Zhen looked at the documents for a while, looked up and saw that the kitten was still working hard and laughed, stood up and walked over, intending to pick up the kitten and show him the scene outside the window. However, the annoyed Fang He was immediately taken aback when he heard the sound of the man getting up, arched and ran to the side, leaped on all fours to the bookshelf, and Baiyu eyes stared at Li Zhen. The scary look of the kitten made Li Zhen pause, and the smile in his eyes faded. Such fear in his pets were not the first. Li Zhen felt that pets were spiritual, although his hands were only separated from each other. Plastic gloves have stuck to the blood of various victims, but all the animals have been retreating to him for a long time, and this cat who looks very smart in front of him seems to be no exception. Li Zhen reluctantly accepted the reality, stopped disturbing the kitten, turned around and continued to read the document. This time Li Zhen didn't look up again, letting the kitten flutter on the window over and over again. Fang He didn't know how many times he had rushed, and he was tired and paralyzed. He lay down on the ground and looked at the people over there who was indulging in the pictures. The whole cat was resentful. It was raised by a perverted murderer. Don't be too dark. Before Fang He had enough strength to fight the window edge, the sudden sound of music made him startled, only to realize that it was this person's mobile phone. He remembered in a daze that there were such high-class objects before the end of the world. Fang He looked at it stupidly. The person picked up the phone and connected. Team Chen, something is going on. Li Zhen's magnetic voice didn't fluctuate at all. From the other side's point of view, the voice sounded calm and horrifying. Li Zhen, I need you to get off work overtime today, and a corpse is found, and you need to come to the scene. Isn't this guy really a thing? The opposite person's words were rough, and they sounded irritating. Protect the scene, I'll go over immediately. Li Zhen frowned and glanced at the case picture on the computer. This is the fourth one after counting the previous ones. Li Zhen hung up the phone, and the location address of Team Chen had been sent over. Li Zhen turned off the computer and hurriedly picked up his clothes and put on shoes. The cat's ears are more sensitive. Fang He turned the cat's ears to listen, and he heard the voice on the other side clearly, but the content of the dialogue made Fang He a little clouded, although he was 8 years old when the end of the world broke out. But his memory is missing. Many of the common sense things before the end of the world were either not learned or forgotten for too long. After all, the following 13 years were cruel apocalyptic, and most of what he could remember was related to the apocalyptic of. But Fang He felt that this person named Li Zhen didn't seem to be what he imagined. Fang He followed Li Zhen far away to the living room with a bit of amazement. He looked at Li Zhen who was going to go out from a distance on the sofa, his eyes were full of confusion. Li Zhen turned around and saw the kitten hiding behind the sofa with only half of his face exposed. His jade-like cat eyes looked at him dumbly. Li Zhen was taken aback for a moment, and the corners of his mouth raised slightly. Be good, I'll be back soon. Fang He Mao opened her mouth and retracted her head. When the Yan Wang's face said this, the voice and the expressions were so strange that it was hard to describe. Listening to the sound of the door closing, Fang He hesitated for a while, and ran to the computer on Yan Wang's face. Even if he went out in a hurry, he did not forget to turn off the computer. When Fang He tried to open it, he found that the computer was locked. He can't open the password. Fang He Mao's paw was pressed randomly on the keyboard for a while. Obviously, it was impossible to get lucky. It was obviously impossible to find clues on the computer to determine what the face of the Yan Wang named Li Zhen did. With Li Zhen's uniform, the owner of the pet shop was stunned for a moment. When he saw Li Zhen's cold face, the owner's face was a little green, His heart was slightly lifted, and the owner smiled at Li Zhen stiffly. "What's the matter with you?" Li Zhen stretched out his hand and put the box on the table, saying concisely, "I picked up a kitten, and you find him a good owner." When Fang He heard this, he scratched the box vigorously. He had already decided to follow this person with the face of the Yan Wang. Why did this person decide not to him? The shopkeeper breathed a sigh of relief, glanced at the kitten whose head poked out in a panic, and said, "This kitten looks like the one I lost yesterday." Li Zhen frowned, "Are you sure?" The shopkeeper stretched out his hand to lift the lid, easily grabbed the kitten's back neck, reached out his hand over the kitten's front paws, and said with certainty, "It's true that my black girl gave birth to 4 kittens in a litter. They are all this black and white kittens ready for sale. They don't have any cat collars. This kitten is so ghostly and ran away accidentally, but this kitten really has a mark on its front paws. A little black spot." Fang He, who was caught by the back of his neck, was furious, trying to struggle, but his power as a kitten was limited, not to mention that the back of the neck was an untouchable place for kittens. Fang He was really weak, and could only stare at the shopkeeper with his eyes. The action of the shop owner also caused Li Zhen to frown slightly. Although he also carried the kitten by the back of the neck, it was only that moment. The shop owner's holding time was a bit long and he frowned slightly and glanced at the shop owner. The plum-shaped cushion of the kitten that came out had a small black dot in the center. The shopkeeper pointed to the corner of the wall, "Hey, look over there. They are together. It rained when I put them in the shop yesterday, and the kitten ran away when I moved the cage." Fang He stared at the cat's eyes. There was really a big cage over there, with 3 black and white kittens in it. They were about the same size and shape as him. If they weren't kept by someone, it would be so small. It is impossible to grow into such a ball of hair. Li Zhen walked over and looked at the 3 black and white kittens inside. They were really similar to the one he picked up. Perhaps the evil spirits were too strong. Li Zhen's approach caused the kittens that were scattered in different positions to shrink immediately. When they came together, they looked at him warily with eyes of different colors open. The shopkeeper went over to open the cage and put the kitten in it. Fang He, who was locked in the cage, glared at the 2 of them angrily, and stretched out the white cat's paw from the gap in the cage to scratch at Li Zhen. No matter how cold the Yan Wang's face is, it's still very good to him. Give him food and drink. Without restricting his freedom, it's better now. He was locked up when he entered the pet shop. For future freedom, Fang He finally broke through the psychological barrier and screamed meowly. Fang He was moved by the bleak voice, pleading tone, and resentment in his eyes. Li Zhen squatted down, looked at the kitten for a while, stretched out his hand to touch the kitten's paw, and frowned slightly. The kitten seemed less alert to him. But time is too late. The evidence collected at the scene last night needs to be appraised today, and he has to go. When Fang He was touched his paw, he thought this person was going to change his mind, but this person just left. Seeing that the face of Yan Wang was missing, Fang He cat was irritable, holding the cage with his paws. He had long known that he would be so cute and flattering the Lord Yan. It's okay now. Being locked up is a trivial matter. He hasn't been locked up before. The point is how long he will be locked up. Will he miss the only 2 days of preparation before the end of the world? When the shopkeeper saw that the person had finally left, he breathed a sigh of relief. He glanced at the cat in the cage holding the cat's paws in the cage, and muttered a little strangely, "You are an inconvenient little cat." People, at first glance, people who don't know how to play cats well, stop barking and find you a gentle owner. Fang Hebai glanced at the shopkeeper with faint eyes, moved to the corner of the cage and shrank. The day before the end of life, he just spent it in the cage like this? "Hey, is your little cat emotional?" The owner laughed, shook his head and went to work on other things. All kinds of pets in a house need to be taken care of for a long time only for hygiene. Think about the person who just had a cold face and was obviously evil. The owner thought, let him raise a cat, he will be a competent shovel officer? Just kidding. Just now when Fang He stretched out the cat's paws, he had already determined the material of the cage. It was made of metal and hard. With the ability of a kitten like him, it would be difficult to damage it. The cage door was fastened with a buckle. Seeing that the shopkeeper cleaned up the shop, Fang He jumped to the cage door buckle and stretched out the cat's paw to fiddle with the buckle. Facts have proved that the cat's paw is really not suitable for such a thing. Fang He was surrounded by a few kittens. The claws were so sore that they couldn't open them. Then I can only think of another way. Fang He squatted down at the door of the cage. As soon as Fang He squatted down, the other kittens got even better. They all leaned over and yelled meowly. Sticking to Fang He's side and rubbing him, Fang He was very uncomfortable being rubbed by the three kittens. He flicked his tail, gave a fierce cry, moved and ran to the other side, but the three black and white kittens again he ran over to rub him, tilted his head and the cat's paws were still tentatively touching Fang He's head from time to time. Fang He cat stared at them and moved angrily again. However, perseverance seemed to be the nature of a kitten, and he followed again. Fang He wanted to cry without tears, and his green eyes looked at the store door with bitterness. The first customer to visit was a woman with a child. The child was only about 5 years old, with white eyes curiously looking at the various small animals in the pet shop, when they saw the kittens in their cages. The eyes are bright. The kitten in their cage is naturally the child's first choice. Fang He raised his head and glanced up. For him, the child is not his favorite owner, so Fang He lay in the cage lazily, not wanting to move forward at all. When the shopkeeper brought a cat funny stick and handed it to the child to let him tease the kitten in the cage, Fang He's heart really collapsed. The cat funny stick had a magical charm. It was in the cage. He leaned in and out, causing several kittens to rush over to play. Fang He glanced at it, his heart was itchy, and he wished to pounce on him and scratch happily. Patience and tolerance, the barb on Fang He's cat's paw stretched and contracted again, finally holding back the nature of being a cat. Bai Wei's eyes stared at the shopkeeper who was introduced by the child. The child finally chose a more lively kitten to take away. When the child left, Fang He suddenly woke up. If this was adopted by a child, wouldn't it be easy for him to run away and lose himself? With a good opportunity, Fang He turned around and stared at the store door. The second person who came to the door was a woman with delicate makeup and a perfume smell on her body. She came up and asked the owner if she had a purebred Persian cat, preferably 2 cat eyes, one with blue and one green, with high-pitched eyes. The appearance was very unpleasant, and was dismissed by the shopkeeper in a few words. This kind of person who raises cats for showing off, the shopkeeper has never liked, not to mention that there is really no Persian cat here. Then, the following morning, Fang He saw a few customers. There were women and children, couples and sisters. However, Fang He, who had made up his mind to be adopted and took the opportunity to escape, was surprised by not many customers. Selected? Squatting in the corner, Fang He sighed in distress. Why is he not pleasing to be so cute? At noon, the shopkeeper fed the kittens his homemade cat food with small fish. Fang He looked at the sticky, fishy smell. The experience of the apocalypse prevented him from resisting any food. It's good to be able to stutter, not to mention that although the cat food dish doesn't look very good, it looks delicious under the cat's sense of smell. However, Fang He, who was entangled in his mind, had no appetite. He eagerly wanted to escape. Fang Heun was in no mood. Seeing that the last chubby kitten had eaten his portion, it seemed that he didn't seem to be enough, so he was very bold and gave it to him. Let it pass. It was another afternoon, and the sad reminder was that none of them came to buy pets. Several customers were old customers who came to bathe and take care of their pets. Therefore, Fang He could only continue to fight the buckle of the cage. The hard work pays off. The cat, under Fang He's unremitting efforts, the buckle happened to be opened. Fang He's cat's eyes watched vigilantly at the shopkeeper who was taking care of the tabby cat, and ran towards him. The store door. Just before he rushed out, a person blocked his way, and the back of his head was quickly held by the person. Fang He almost wanted to bite, but he stared at the cat's eyes to see the person who was holding him. Jasper, the same cat's eyes lit up suddenly. Meow. Fang He also resisted, pressing his head firmly against the palm of his head, and the cat's paw spared no effort to press Li Zhen's wrist under the cushion. Boss. Li Zhen held the kitten in his palm and looked at the busy shopkeeper over there. Hey, wait a minute, I'm busy here. See what you need first. The shopkeeper was busy, and answered without looking up. Fang He looked at Li Zhen expectantly with his cat's eyes open, and changed his mind. Accept me, you will never regret it. Li Zhen lowered his head and glanced at the kitten. His almost shining aquamarine eyes were extremely gratifying. In fact, he is very busy at work this day, but unlike the past, he can't devote himself to work, and always think of this kitten from time to time. This kitten is different from any pets he sees in his daily life. There was a very clever and intelligent charm in his eyes. The moment before he finally left the pet shop, there seemed to be anxious panic in the cat Jasper's eyes. Li Zhen hurriedly completed the work of the day and provided the detective captain with more detailed site information. He hurried over. Fortunately, he came, otherwise he didn't know that the kitten was going to come again. Where to go? Fang He looked forward to it for a while, but he didn't see any reaction from Li Zhen, and he was anxious. If you don't want to adopt him, please raise your hand and let him run out to make a living. Tomorrow is the last day, and he will be put back in the cage. This is killing his cat. The shopkeeper over there finally repaired the cat's paws for the Ultondon tabby cat and put the cat into the cat basket left by the cat owner. When he looked up and saw Li Zhen, the corners of his mouth moved, and he said with a stiff smile. It's you, do you need anything? Li Zhen held Fang He in his hand and raised his hand. Didn't I ask you to find him a master? Why did you let him run away again? The shopkeeper realized that when he saw the kitten in Li Zhen's hand, he smiled stiffly, and looked back at the cat cage. I don't know when it was caught. This kitten is really against the sky. I still have to look back. Put the lock on. Fang He almost wanted to cry without tears when he heard this. He was so unlucky. Is Li Zhen going to let the shopkeeper shut him back and wait for others to come and buy? Meow, how can this work? Fang He, who was born with evil to the gall, scratched Li Zhen's wrist with a claw. I don't believe you don't let go. Li Zhen was caught. He paused slightly, and turned the kitten's body, looked at the kitten's eyes that seemed to be widened with anger, raised his eyebrows, and the suffocation brought by the autopsy on his body. These pets don't mention scratching him. As soon as he hangs up his shadow, he will probably disappear. This kitten really surprised Li Zhen. Not only was he not afraid, but he dared to resist. Li Zhen took back his hand that was caught by the cat and held it with one hand. While holding the kitten, he rubbed the kitten's neck comfortably. Before letting go, Fang He struggled to stretch out the cat's paw. Just when he was about to scratch Li Zhen's other hand, a red string fell on his neck, and Fang He was dumbfounded. Looking down at the peach pit bell hanging on his neck, the cat flicked its paws, and saw that it was stained with Li Zhen's blood, suddenly feeling weak. Fang He raised his eyes and saw Li Zhen smirk slightly. Although he still felt a sneer, Fang He clearly understood what he meant. This handsome man with the face of Yan Wang was planning to adopt him. Fang He wanted to roll on the spot. Li Zhen raised his eyebrows when he looked at the peach pit bell that the kitten was carrying. It was just right. This thing was given to him by his old sister. It was made by Peach Pit. It didn't make any noise, but the hand-carved look was quite delicate. His elder sister forced it to him and ordered him to carry it with him. She said that she had asked him for a lottery from the mountain and said that he was stunned by professionalism. This year, there was a disaster of blood and light, so she bought him a peach core from the entrance of the temple. The bell warded him away from evil spirits. The disaster of feelings was brought about by this kitten. Li Zhen glanced at the slightly bleeding paw prints. It was a very fierce kitten, which he liked. The shopkeeper looked at the interaction of one person and one cat, and the corners of his mouth twitched. He hadn't seen what kind of shoveling officer for so many years. This kind of action and face are in sharp contrast, and he can calm a small milk cat with a cold face. Really the first time. Li Zhen rubbed Fang He's kitten's neck and looked up at the shopkeeper. I want this cat, how much is it? Seeing the wound on his hand, the shopkeeper said while looking for iodine, your hand is scratched. Go and wash it. It must be disinfected. Li Zhen glanced at the sink in the store and walked over with the kitten in his arms. Fang He felt even more guilty when he saw Li Zhen washing with one hand there. He didn't know if there was any virus on the cat's paw. Using the iodophor given by the owner to clean up the small wounds, Li Zhen looked back at the owner again and said, I bought this kitten. The owner hesitated for a while, are you sure? Will you take care of cats? Li Zhen frowned, do you still need to answer this kind of question to buy your cat? The shopkeeper shook his head hurriedly, is it because this kind of kitten is more cumbersome to take care of and has not been trained yet? You may need to train yourself specifically for peeing, and you need to pay a lot of patience. It's hard for the shop owner to imagine such a person chasing after the kitten and tidying up everywhere. Wouldn't this person really be angry and kill the kitten? Fang He silently rubbed his face with cat paws. Does he need special training? He must let Li Zhen see what a smart cat is, a cat that cares less. Are there any related books? Li Zhentai didn't worry about this at all. When he was taking the forensic examination, he didn't go downstairs for a month and turned over the relevant books at home and abroad. He was confident that he should raise a kitten. Effortless, not to mention keeping a pet has always been his dream. After all, it is not so easy to find a kitten who is not afraid of his evil spirits. The owner is really surprised. He should be a cat lover to have this heart. There is no book, but I have a cat journal that I made, and I can give you a copy. That, even though my cat mother Jaime had an injection, this little one has just finished fighting, but if you are scratched by a cat to be safe, you may need to be vaccinated against rabies. 5 shots of the vaccine will take a month. Fang He stared, yes, I was ill. The resentment of being locked up caused Fang He to wave the cat's paw at the shopkeeper, and quickly come over and let me catch it. The day after tomorrow, there was a zombie outbreak, and he died of rabies. Perhaps it is better to be eaten by zombies. Li Zhen nodded, you give me a set of everything the kitten needs. Okay, even if I send you this kitten, I will find all the other things for you, you just pay for that. The owner was not entangled with the customer's cold face, and turned around to find something for Fang He. Li Zhen didn't refuse, and he paid all the things directly, but Fang He was distressed when Li Zhen paid the money. If the money is used to buy supplies, he can buy a lot of things. Buying such a pile of cat food and cat toys, is there something to do with it? However, Li Zhen seemed to be happy to spend the money and took the kitten out of the pet shop. The kitten Fang He who got out of the cage was particularly excited. When Li Zhen put him in the car, Fang He threw his tail excitedly and squatted comfortably on the co-pilot. After putting things in, Li Zhen sat in the car to take a look, chuckled lightly, and reached out and rubbed the kitten's head. Fang He was rubbed his head with some resentment, turned his head and cat's eyes stared at Li Zhen angrily. Li Zhen didn't notice anything, and rubbed the kitten's head once, and it felt very smooth. Just call you Hemiao. Name? Fang He was stunned for a while, and a vague memory flashed in his head. It seemed that someone had called him Hemiao when he was young. Is Hemiao his nickname? It's a pity that Fang He, who has a lot of memory loss, can't remember it anymore. Fang He thought this person was going straight to the outpatient clinic to get some vaccine, but Li Zhen went home directly. Fang He, who was picked up again, was anxious for a while, and it didn't matter. Even if this person was going, he could only the first shot can be made, and the rest of the estimate hangs. Who can give him a vaccine when the end of the world is coming? The first thing he did when he got home, Fang He hurried to the kitchen, jumped onto Li Zhen's table with agility, and screamed without caring about the image with his tail. The lunch had been given to those in the same cage. The last little fat cat, Fang He is now hungry. In order to have a good relationship with the owner, it is still acceptable to sell cute Fang He appropriately. Li Zhen at the door hooked his lips slightly, changed his clothes, glanced at He Miao waiting in the kitchen, shook his head and laughed. Although the cat didn't seem to care about the evil spirit he might have, Li Zhen still went into the bathroom. After taking care of himself, he entered the kitchen door under Fang He's expectant gaze. However, when Fang He saw that Li Zhen was carrying something from the pet shop, he felt a bit resentful. When Li Zhen tore the cat food package and poured out the cat biscuits from the cat food tray, Fang He's cat's paw stretched out. Zhang, he wanted to eat fish floss made of dried small fish, but Li Zhen frowned while holding a few pages of paper, but he didn't even see Fang He's little resentful eyes. Fang He slowly moved to the cat food tray. He didn't discriminate against anything, but he missed the dried fish more. When Fang He's cat's mouth ate the cat food, his cat's eyes lit up slightly, although it was a bit inexplicable. It's awkward, but to be honest, the cat biscuit that Li Zhen bought tastes pretty good. After devouring it, Fang He cat rubbed his mouth with paws, dumbfoundedly watching Li Zhen actually took out the small dried fish and put it into the cooking machine to make fish floss. According to the pet shop owner's instructions, the kitten would feed it a little bit. Fish food helps to replenish calcium. His seedlings are still growing, so it's okay to eat some cooked dried fish. When the delicious fish floss was delivered to Fang He raised the cat's head to look at Li Zhen, and then at the fish floss. This was the temptation of Chi Kuo. Fang He is still just a kitten after all, and his appetite is not very large. The amount of cat biscuits that Li Zhen had poured on the cat food tray before was also quite large, so he is already very full now. But looking at the topped plate of fish floss, although it is only the amount of 2 small fish dried, it looks a bit too much after being beaten into fish floss. In line with the good habit of never wasting, Fang He lowered his head again and ate the fish floss. The kitten's stomach instinctively made a purring sound. Under the contrast, he felt that the cat biscuits were really not there. This tastes good. Li Zhen looked at the snoring kitten eating fish floss made of dried small fish. He reached out and touched the kitten's back. The kitten leaned down softly along his hand. The rare docile, smooth cat hair, it's very comfortable. When it reaches the tip of the tail, the kitten's tail will slightly hook up to the side, and it will pass the back of his hand unconsciously. When Fang He finished eating, he saw Li Zhen stand up, packed the cat litter tray and various cat toys bought in the pet shop. Fang He glanced disdainfully, and jumped off the table by himself. Ran into the bathroom. However, the toilet lid was covered, and Fang He, who was already urinating, squatted with black lines on his head, feeling like he couldn't lower his paws. Li Zhen, who followed Fang He into the bathroom, looked at the He Miao kitten squatting in front of the toilet with a laugh, and placed the litter tray in his hand next to the toilet. Fang He cat glanced at the cat litter tray with disdain, jumped up, jumped onto the toilet lid, and meowed at Li Zhen. The meaning is obvious. I don't know how to use a cat litter tray. The toilet lid is open. Li Zhen's ghost was awkward, and he said, "Get out of the way, I'll open it for you." Fang He then left the toilet lid under Li Zhen's somewhat surprised gaze. When Li Zhen opened the toilet lid, he jumped onto the edge of the toilet. Fang He really didn't want to pee in front of Li Zhen. At any rate, he was also an adult, and it was a bit uncomfortable to be looked at. Therefore, Fang He glared at Li Zhen, expressing his meaning. Li Zhen frowned slightly. Could this expression of his family He Miao be constipated? After staring for a long time without seeing Li Zhen turning around, Fang He got angry, and let out a meow. The very anxious voice heard in Li Zhen's ears, but it was not the case at all. Li Zhen immediately turned around and went outside and found the cat-keeping log given by the shopkeeper to see if there was any content aimed at constipation in kittens. The face of the Yan Wang finally left, and Fang Heke solved his own problems Shiran, and he almost couldn't help being looked at by such a cold face. Li Zhen over there was still checking whether there was any content in this area, and there came the sound of toilet flushing. Li Zhen holding the cat log while watching and walking, looked at Fang He standing on the toilet tank. After a while, the cat's IQ seemed a bit unusual. Fang He flicked his tail proudly, jumped off the water tank, and jumped onto the sofa, forming a ball of hair. His cat's eyes scanned Li Zhen, thinking about how to communicate with the cat owner. Li Zhen looked at Fang He with a chuckle, found a cat toy like a grey mouse and threw it on the sofa. At this time, the takeaway order he ordered arrived. Li Zhen gave the money to the takeaway, and took the takeaway to put it back. When I arrived on the coffee table, I poured a glass of water and started eating. Fang He glanced at the grey-haired mouse toy with disgust, raised a paw and threw it aside, squatting down and watching Li Zhen eat. What Li Zhen ordered was a meal from a nearby restaurant, which was delivered every day. He had always been indifferent to the food, just a light and healthy entrance. Fang He glanced at it and felt that it was definitely not as delicious as his dried fish. Cat's eyes continued to stare at the owner of Hades' face, thinking of countermeasures in his head, so that he would not let his owner think that he was a monster first. However, at this moment, Li Zhen's cell phone rang suddenly. Team Chen? Something. Li Zhen finished eating and connected the phone. Fang He leaned slightly to listen to the voice in the phone, still the familiar rough voice. The previous Li Zhen called him Team Chen's number. Li Zhen, please do it. Team Chen's voice over there sounded a little dull with a low voice. Speak. Li Zhen put down the chopsticks in his other hand. Just come to see a victim at the party, and Lu Fei doesn't say anything. Don't go. Li Zhen bluntly refused. Although some of the judgments he gave to Chen Weiming each time were the truth, it still didn't meet the requirements. If it weren't for him to make soft and hard buzzes, he revealed some more truths. Circumstance, so that Chen Weiming can collect clues. Don't, forensic Dr. Lu refuses to say, come here and have a look, and then you can determine whether the murderer is a human or a beast. How do I look like a human with the teeth marks? Fang He squinted the cat's eyes slightly when he heard it. He was relatively sensitive to this kind of thing recently. Although the apocalyptic outbreak is the day after tomorrow, it seems that the initial emergence of people infected with the virus was earlier. Thinking of this, Fang He became a little nervous, jumped onto Li Zhen's leg, and rubbed Li Zhen's clothes vigorously. Li Zhen rubbed the kitten's back with his hands, and continued to refuse, take a picture and send it over. The photo can't be seen clearly on the spot, please, Li Zhen, you come here, just show it, I see this tooth print is a little hairy. Li Zhen frowned and touched the kitten's hand for a while, send the address here. Yes, but the problem seems to be a bit serious, and it's a bit disgusting. You'd better come back after eating. Team Chen over there took a look at the corpse that had been chewed to almost see the bones and was a little nauseous. Li Zhen hung up the phone, but his family he meow exploded, squeezing his clothes with his paws, a pair of jasper cat eyes staring at him, meowing meowing. Ma Dan, Fang He swears. For now, Li Zhen's job is simply a high-risk occupation. If this is really a corpse that a zombie has gnawed on, if Li Zhen accidentally contracted the virus and hummed, what is it? What? Li Zhen looked at the kitten that was holding him unreleased with a bit of speech, and just hung up on him and packed his things. When Li Zhen walked to the door, Fang He was going crazy, and he squatted along with his clothes. In front of Li Zhen's chin, Fang He, who couldn't speak human words, stared at the cat's eyes and meowed, didn't know how to stop him. Hey, he meow, I'll be back in a while. Li Zhen touched the kitten's back and soothed. Fang He continued screaming, "Did you say he was easy?" He was finally adopted by this person. Just find an appropriate way to let this person know the end of the world in advance and prepare something in advance. He wasted so much time. I finally made up my mind to have a showdown. This person is good, so he rushed towards the suspected virus. Aren't you looking for death like this? However, Li Zhen is a workaholic. A few words from Team Chen have already aroused his interest. He must go during this trip. Hardened his heart and used a little more effort to lift the kitten down, put it aside and go out quickly. And closed the door. Fang He stared at the closed door stupidly, screamed angrily, ran to the kitchen, and knocked over a bottle of ketchup with dried fish on the table to the ground. The broken glass bottle and the blood-red ketchup that burst open had a different kind of irritation. Fang He jumped off the table, carefully avoiding the glass fragments. The cat's paws were glued with ketchup, turned his head and saw the blank space under the decorative painting of the living room, ran over quickly, and the cat's paws wrote crookedly on the wall. When he got up, the tomato sauce was not enough. Fang He ran back to dip some, and continued to smear on the wall. Fang He ran back and forth twice and finally finished writing the words he wanted to write. He looked at the crooked handwriting with an inexplicable sense of horror. There is a huge outbreak of a heterogeneous virus, Li Zhen, you idiot, if you don't prepare supplies, just wait to die. It's just that Fang He doesn't know that this sense of horror is felt by him. His sentence is actually very happy. There are 3 typos, not to mention a mixture of various chaotic plum blossom-shaped cat paw prints, so he can barely read it. More than half of the handwriting. Of course, the fault was caused by the sudden eruption of the last days. In the 13 years of the last days, Fang He had no chance to learn more words. After Fang He finished this, the cat with ketchup on his paws began to scurry around Li Zhen's room, looking at all of Li Zhen's things inside and out. The sad thing is that Li Zhen is a person on weekdays. The food is always taken out by that good restaurant, and it is rarely fired. There is no rice noodles in the kitchen. Fang He struggled to open the refrigerator door. In addition to his few packets of dried fish, there were some fruit crisps, a few cans of beer, and only a little quick frozen food in the frozen layer. Fang He angrily jumped out of the refrigerator and wandered around the room, but found no other food. It seems that tomorrow's biggest goal is to prepare enough food in airtight packages. Although as the end times continued, some bases began to transform abandoned land and call people to farm, but under the crisis of evolving zombies, the output was still limited, and food was always the most in demand. Although the sealed package may not last for many years, even air-dried hard sausages that can crumble the teeth are still rare and valuable and can be exchanged for many things. Of course there is still water. The current water source has not been polluted, but when the zombie virus broke out the day after tomorrow, the safety of the water source may not be guaranteed. Fang He can't remember exactly when the water source was contaminated. The contaminated water needs to be continuously boiled. It can be sterilized by boiling for more than 20 minutes. Not only is it bad for the body, but the energy used to boil the water will also vary in the future. It slowly decreases. So be prepared. All kinds of bottled water, and large volume water storage tanks are also what Fang He must prepare tomorrow. Fang He squatted on the messy sofa stained with ketchup. A pair of cat eyes looked at the size of the room, while planning the use of every space in a serious way. A lot of thoughts kept flashing in Fang He's head. Fang He could hardly wait to be able to pick up his shovel officer to go out and make a big purchase now. However, looking at the clock on the table, Fang He was suddenly startled and unknowingly under his thinking, it was gradually midnight. Fang He ran to the door, squatting on the soft floor mat at the door and waving his tail anxiously. Wouldn't Li Zhen not come back tonight? Fortunately, Fang He waited at the door for a while, and footsteps appeared outside the door, but before Fang He was happy, he heard that the voice was not right. It seemed that it was not his shoveling officer. When the door opened, Fang He hurried to the back of the sofa, poked his head out slightly, and stared at the person who came in. When Li Zhen went out, he didn't turn off the lights. Perhaps he subconsciously felt that his family He Miao should be afraid. So when Chen Weiming opened the door, he saw messy red footprints on the ground, and the corners of his mouth twitched. He really did not expect that his cold-faced hair would raise a cat, so he had to come here specifically to prepare for his cat. Some food. I think that after the boy Li Zhen moved here, he tried to come and sit here many times, but he was pushed away by the boy. Today, in order to let him help the cat prepare something to eat, he gave him the key so casually. Ns. Chen Weiming wasn't scared by the blood-red cat paw prints on the ground. He has been a detective captain for some time. He still knows whether it is blood stains or ketchup. Fang He's cat's eyes widened, and he looked at the person who came in vigilantly. This person was average-looking, but his eyes were sharp. After a casual glance, he looked at where Fang He was, causing Fang He to withdraw his head abruptly. Silently slipped under the cabinet next to the sofa. When he saw the kitten, Chen Weiming laughed, put his uniform jacket aside, and went into the living room. When he saw the graffiti under the decorative painting, Chen Weiming was taken aback for a while and burst into laughter. Li Zhen, this the kid is fun too, he is simply a model of Meng Sao. It is enough to raise a black and white kitten at home, and even teach the kitten to write on the wall with ketchup. It is difficult for Li Zhen to treat his kitten as a cat. Demon? On a whim, Chen Weiming squatted on the ground, dipped the sticky ketchup that was not completely dry on the ground, and added a wicked grin beside this sentence, and then stood up. Fang He saw the cheeky smiling face on the wall. The cat paw really wanted to call it over at once, and give this uninvited guest a series of scratches. Who is this person? Why is it so arrogant? That's the decree of this cat. You add what's the matter with a mean smile. Chen Weiming turned and looked at the cabinet by the sofa, and said in a rough voice, "Little cat, your master will be working overtime tonight. I don't know if I can come back tomorrow. Let me prepare something for you. The province will be hungry tomorrow. Come out obediently and let me touch, and I will find you dried fish." Fang He has no time to entangle. This voice seems to be a bit familiar. He has been shocked by the meaning of this person's words. Li Zhen is working overtime. May not be back today and tomorrow. With a meow, Fang He rushed out of the cabinet and rushed towards the door. Chen Weiming didn't close the door when he entered. Fang He's idea is also simple. Since he can't wait for Li Zhen to see the warning he painted on the wall tonight, he can only run to find someone. He remembers where Li Zhen's car is parked. As long as he finds the car, he will definitely can find Li Zhen nearby. However, when Fang He was less than 1 meter away from the door suddenly slammed shut. Fang He angrily stared at the person who was moving faster than him, and rushed towards this person. Chen Wei raised his eyebrows and easily pulled the cat's fur, stopped the sharp cat's paws, and picked up Fang He. "You little cat is going to run out and lost it. The kid Li Zhen will ask me to settle the account. Just stay at home and wait for Li Zhen to come back and let him take you out." Fang He struggled vigorously, but this person obviously did not have Li Zhen's indulgence to him, and his cat's paws could not even reach this person's wrist. Chen Weiming carried the kitten into the kitchen and looked around. When he saw the cat cage, he stuffed Fang He in and closed the door. Fang He was angrily scratching the cat cage with his cat's paws. At this time, he finally remembered who his voice was familiar to him. It was Team Chen who called out his shovel officer tonight. Fang He became more angry the more he thought about it. Jasper-like eyes can't wait to stare at the person who is causing them trouble outside. Chen Weiming found cat food and poured out a plate of cat biscuits, then after thinking about it, he found a cup and poured a glass of water. Without considering whether the cat would use the cup, he turned and opened the refrigerator. Li Zhen specifically confessed that he wanted to make some fish floss for the kitten. Chen Weiming took out the dried fish from the refrigerator and looked around. However, he had never used a cooking machine before and didn't know what it was. So, Chen Weiming he took out the dried fish, shredded it casually, and put it on the plate with cat biscuits. In fact, the cooking machine was prepared by his old sister when Li Zhen moved into this house. It was used last time when Li Yu came, and Li Zhen took a look at it before knowing how to use it. As it was finished, Chen Weiming washed his hands, glanced at the kitten over there that was always scratching the cage, gave a smirk, stretched out his hand and patted the cage. "I will let you out now." Fang he stopped scratching. The green cat's eyes looked at Chen Weiming, and Chen Weiming raised his eyebrows. "You are a very clever cat." However, when Fang he thought that this person would let it out, this person squatted at the kitchen door carrying the cat cage. When Fang he ran out from the cage door opened, Chen Weiming suddenly closed the kitchen door and put Fang he ji was locked in the kitchen. Fang he was shocked, turned around and looked at the kitchen door being locked. His heart collapsed, and he was locked in a place as big as the kitchen again. This Chen team is definitely their nemesis. Fang he made up his mind, and when he meets this person in the future, he must be a little bit red, so as to eliminate the bad luck that this person brings to them. When Fang he heard that the door outside was closed and the footsteps of the Chen team gradually disappeared, Fang he lay on the ground, almost crying without tears. Now he can only pray that his shovel officer will return sooner. Time is really running out. Fall. More importantly, what Fang he hopes most is that Li Zhen will definitely live a great life and never catch the virus. The more Fang he thought about it, the more he felt uncomfortable. Looking at the only window in the kitchen, he rushed up to the kitchen console quickly. The cat's paws were enough for the window handles, and there was still a little distance. Fang he looked around and saw a small pot in the distance. After strenuously moving the pot, Fang he jumped up, the two white cat's claws pressed hard, and finally unscrewed the window handle. Fang he shook the cat's paws and looked outside from the glass. At a height of more than 20 stories, if he accidentally fell down, there would be absolutely no chance of survival. It is said that cats have 9 lives, but Fang he feels that the legend is not reliable. Fang he was entangled in his heart for a while, but he opened the window without hesitation, and cautiously rushed to the edge of the window. The outside scene made Fang he dizzy, and he tried not to look down, aiming at the edge of the window that was less than 20 centimeters outside. The next side fell down. Fortunately, Fang he has a cat-like body, which is inherently flexible and light. Fang he's footing is relatively accurate. Standing on the window edge of the narrow 20-story building, it took a while for my inner self-building to move my head to observe the surrounding environment. The barb on the cat's paw tightly grasped the window edge. The windows on the next floor are as narrow as they are in a straight line. If you jump directly, there is obviously no possibility, but at this moment, Fang he knew that he could only go down and slowly stepped closer to the corner of the window. The surface of this building is a light brown brick design. Fortunately, it is not particularly smooth. Fang he cat's paws scratched on the brick wall. After confirming that he could maintain his body weight, Fang he was about to slide down. Fang he pressed hard against the wall and carefully retreated. Every time he moved, the barbs on the cat's paws firmly grasped the wall, and Fang he slowly moved down and backed slightly like this. When it came to the window edge downstairs, Fang he carefully settled down, just like this one layer after another. Fang he was helplessly rejoicing at this time. Fortunately, he was a cat, and he could see things around him clearly in the middle of the night. When he finally moved the second floor, Fang he was almost exhausted and paralyzed. He squatted down on the edge of the second floor window to rest, watching the sky gradually turning white. He estimated that it took less than 4 hours, and the day was about to dawn. After Fang he had enough rest, he jumped directly from the second floor to a big tree downstairs. When the cat's paws hit the ground, Fang he almost burst into tears. It was not easy. He looked up at his house shoveling shit. The official house, that is the 22nd floor, can come down so smoothly, for the 2-month-old Hemiao kitten, it is simply the pinnacle of cat birth. Fang He easily ran out of the community where Li Zhen's family was located, and ran towards the parking lot where Li Zhen had rescued him along the road he had seen in Li Zhen's car. The air scenery in the early morning is very good, there has been such a peaceful time in the last days, but Fang He only sighed for a second and left it behind. These prosperity and tranquility will slowly be annihilated after tomorrow. These seemingly peaceful streets will be filled with virus-infected zombies, the entire city's buildings will gradually decline, and everything in the last days will be so desolate and bleak. Although Fang He remembers a lot of roads, as a cat, in order to avoid being hit by a car, he can only walk on green belts and sidewalks. It stands to reason that with such a winding terrain, he may get lost, but he is inexplicably certain that there is really nothing wrong with the path he has walked. After passing a traffic light, Fang He cat stopped and watched his frayed cat paws blew gently. The 2-month-old kitten, the soft cushion on the cat paws had not grown thick yet. The 12th floor slid down, and the road ran on the concrete floor and stone brick floor. It hurts terribly. Fang He replaced his 2 paws and took a break, rubbing his face. He was exhausted when he ran all the way, and he would have a showdown with Li Zhen. He must have Li Zhen prepare countless small dried fishes, which is 1,000 miles away. Compensation for missing persons. Inadvertently, Fang He's cat paw touched the peach pit bell in his neck, and the little blood on the soft cushion wiped the peach pit bell. Fang He's cat paw moved and muttered, "Meow meow." Well, okay, Fang He meant that he was so embarrassed with this thing. But thinking of the inexplicable certainty in his heart, Fang He lowered his head and looked at the peach pit bell. Is it possible that something made of peach pit can really bless people? Fang He's cat paw supported the cat bell, suspecting that the peach core cat bell was a magical object. Fang He's mood became hot, and he shook the cat's head vigorously. Fang He felt that he was a little delusional. Although there are some magical objects in the last days, such as pendants with magical storage space, the materials seem to be jade. Fang He put aside his unrealistic imagination, watching the green light, hurried past the vehicle at the stop line. He didn't care if anyone would regard his behavior as a spectacle. The Fang He cat running this way was exhausted, his stomach was already hungry, and the time was close to noon, and then he was close to his destination. Seeing where Li Zhen might be, Fang He couldn't help squinting the cat's eyes. Before he was lying on his stomach in a drawer, except for seeing that he was in an open parking lot, he didn't even notice the building with the national emblem not far away. Although Fang He still doesn't know Li Zhen's specific occupation, he feels that, apart from the major hospitals, this is the place where the most dangerous and most likely to be infected with the zombie virus. Fang He knew that it was difficult to get in such a magnificent building as a cat. He turned the whole building around, and Fang He didn't find a place where the cat could get in. He couldn't open the glass door alone. Fang He ran to the parking lot annoyed, and saw Li Zhen's car at its original location. Fang He was thinking about whether to go up with the cat's paws, and give the car a series of scratches to sound the car's alarm. The owner of the car brought it in. The car door opened suddenly, and Fang He thought that Li Zhen, who had been thinking about it for a long time, appeared in front of him so brightly. "Thanks, cat bell." Fang He pounced on with a meow, and slammed into Li Zhen's thigh, his paws tightly hooked on Li Zhen's pants. Li Zhen frowned slightly, stretched out his hand to drag Fang He's back. He meow. Meow. Fang He responded cleverly. It is best that the initial trust building is very important, so as to pave the way for the next showdown. Li Zhen stretched out his hand to pick up his hemiao, thinking about how this little thing suddenly appeared here. It is impossible for Chen Weiming to bring it. When Li Zhen saw that he meow was dirty and he saw the cat's paws, his whole face was cold. When Chen Weiming didn't close the door, he meow slipped out and just ran all the way. Here. Fang He, who had caught a glimpse of him, almost shuddered. In fact, it is not just Fang He's blood, but most of it is Fang He's tomato sauce. Li Zhen also confirmed after rechecking that most of the cat's paws were not blood, but seeing the torn soft pads on the cat's paws, Li Zhen was no longer entangled with the ketchup. Li Zhen gently rubbed the back of the kitten's head. "Hey, he meow, let's go home." With just such a sentence, Fang He was in a daze for a while, and his heart was touched inexplicably. Home. Before the end of the world, he had no home. Both his parents died in an air crash. He was fostered at his uncle's house. After the end of the world, after he was infected with the virus, he did not become a zombie, but had a special power, and because of this power, he was sold to a laboratory by his uncle, when he was only 8 years old. At this time, Fang He, who was already 21 years old in mind, was inexplicably new when he heard Li Zhen say that he was going home. The original idea of using Li Zhen to collect materials to make a living suddenly disappeared. The two can support each other as family members to live in the coming end times. Li Zhen hugged Fang He and got into the car. Originally, he came to get something from the car, and then went back to continue listening to several people from the crime team to analyze the case. After staying up all night, he did not make the final result until this morning. He also wanted to go home directly, but the results of the autopsy kept him upset. The identification results of the corpse showed that the victim was not alive. Part of the body parts are dead. The result of the comparison proved to be human tooth marks, not any beasts. This result shocked everyone. This murderer was more cruel and cold-blooded than the previous murderer, extremely psychopathic, or a high degree. Mental patients are very dangerous. It's just that Li Zhen is not ready to go back now. He has done what he was supposed to do. He also told Chen Weiming a few guesses. The rest is to track down the clues. He can't help anymore. Listening there. Just being a listener, it is more important for him to go back and treat his family He meow first. Fang He was put on his lap by Li Zhen. Fang He raised his cat's head, stretched his neck, and carefully stared at Li Zhen's face. His complexion was still cold, but he was obviously rosy and bloody. Even if he stayed up all night after working overtime, Fang He it seemed that he was in good spirits, and it didn't look like he was infected with a virus. Fang He was relieved. In Fang He's cognition, the outbreak of zombie virus is very obvious. As long as the zombie virus is contaminated, the most obvious point is the pale complexion, red eyes, and the gradual loss of reason. The whole process of becoming a zombie does not exceed half an hour. Of course, the mutant is not. It is also infected with the virus. The mutant will gradually turn red, the high fever will not go away, and the extreme water shortage. The longer the duration, the higher the mutant's ability, but the high fever. Many people burn to death. Having determined that Li Zhen is fine, Fang He is relieved. When Li Zhen arrives home and sees the words he wrote on the wall, they can be honest with each other, and then the two can be at this point before the zombie virus outbreak. Inside, prepare enough food and basic supplies. Fang He felt that although it was hard work, it would be good to be able to retrieve his shovel officer. Fang He just lay on Li Zhen's lap and was taken home by Li Zhen all the way back home. When he walked into the elevator, Fang He was still thinking about what he should do after Li Zhen saw the situation in the room. Li Zhen would definitely think that his kitten is unusual. Should he look holy or treacherous at that time, then, with the time running out, Fang He especially wants Li Zhen to go straight to the supermarket racing against time. As soon as Li Zhen opened the door, he felt the abnormality of the room. When the door was fully opened, he saw the blood red on the floor made by ketchup. He was a little helpless. He knew that Xiao Hemiao was not a peaceful cat and could escape in the pet shop. Out of the cage, you can see that this is not an honest master. Fang He's nervous hair was about to stand up, a pair of small claws grabbed Li Zhen's arms, and looked up and waited to see Li Zhen's reaction. When Li Zhen walked into the living room, he looked at the crooked blood-red writing on the wall, and then saw a mean smiling face behind the writing. Li Zhen's handsome and cold face immediately became more chilly and thin. His lips moved, and he wanted to find out Chen Weiming and give Fatty a beating immediately. If he spoofed his family he meow like this, next time I saw him, I would definitely give him something ruthless. Obviously he did not regard the writing on the wall as his own writing by he meow. Fang He was still waiting for Li Zhen to react, but he didn't expect Li Zhen to put him on the sofa with such a cold expression. Fang He looked at Li Zhen anxiously, waiting for the showdown between the two, but he saw the medicine box. Li Zhen endured his anger and hurriedly washed his hands, found the medicine box, dipped it with iodophor, pressed the kitten's body, and gently smeared Fang He's paws. Fang He was stunned for a while. Although the things before him were a waste of time compared to the last days, Fang He was suddenly moved and couldn't get any more, and obediently let Li Zhen gently treat his wounds. The 4 paws were cleaned by Li Zhen and wrapped in gauze. Li Zhen looked at the kitten who was honestly cooperating with him to treat the wound, and rubbed the kitten's chin. Fang He's stomach made a snoring sound unconsciously. After running so much and so hard, he was almost hungry and fainted. Fang He stared at Li Zhen with a bit miserable green eyes, without any. The mentally handicapped meowed. Forget it, let's talk when you're full. Li Zhen gave a chuckle, his stiff, condensed face softened a little, and then he carried the kitten into the kitchen. After finding that the kitchen door was locked, Li Zhen frowned slightly, unscrewing the lock and opening the kitchen door. When Fang He saw the cat biscuit on the table, he was gently pressed by Li Zhen when he wanted to pounce on it. Fang He meowed for unknown reasons and looked up at Li Zhen. At this moment, when Li Zhen saw the cat food tray, it was just a simple torn-up small dried fish. He paused slightly, fearing that the kitten would not be able to eat it, so he reached out and took the cat biscuit in his palm. He leaned close to He Meow's mouth. Fang He was moved for another second, and then he opened his mouth indiscriminately and began to eat. Fang He ate a bit happily. He didn't notice that Li Zhen's face was getting worse and pale at this time. After Fang He finished eating the cat biscuits in Li Zhen's palm, Li Zhen quickly reached out and took a lot of them. When he poured half a plate of cat biscuits, Li Zhen took the cup next to Fang He's mouth. Fang He unceremoniously stretched his head and stretched out the cat's tongue to lick the water. How can the quiet and cute cat soften Li Zhen's expression before it becomes somewhat condensed? After He Meow drank the water, Li Zhen held He Meow and went into the bedroom. He needed to rest for so long after working overtime. He had eaten in the office. I'm not hungry, but I feel a little tired at this time, and I need a good night's sleep. Fang He thought that Li Zhen would chat with him about the handwriting on the wall after feeding him something, so why did he suddenly enter the bedroom? However, Li Zhen hugged Fang He, with his hands touching the soft fur on Fang He's back, and fell asleep within a minute of lying on the bed. This made Fang He anxious, and the shoveling officer's heart was big enough. Don't you doubt him when you see the writing on the wall? Isn't he not afraid of the zombie virus thing he wrote on the wall? Fang He didn't realize that the funny person Chen Weiming's silly smile added to his handwriting directly misled Li Zhen's cognition. Fang He was a little angry. He stretched out his paws wrapped in a lot of gauze and pressed Li Zhen's hand, and broke free from Li Zhen's hand. The cat's paw was pressed on Li Zhen's face, and he wanted to call the man who fell asleep in front of him. When I woke up, I suddenly realized that Li Zhen's face was not right. Fang He was dumbfounded. The cat's paws wrapped in gauze stopped in the air, and suddenly felt very sad. A pair of jasper-like cat eyes stared blankly at Li Zhen, who was still cold after falling asleep. Fang He regrets that his intestines are all green. He should have prevented this person from seeing the victim of the Chen team's stuff. He had long thought that it might have been someone who had been gnawed by a zombie, so why did he let Li Zhen go? Now Li Zhen's condition obviously won't be the abnormal person. The abnormal person is red and feverish, but Li Zhen can be okay, white and cold. But the problem is that the spread of zombie virus is mainly caused by scratches or bites by zombies, or it is caused by drinking contaminated water after water pollution. But his shovel officer doesn't look like there are wounds all over his body, so why is he infected with the virus? Wait, the wound? Fang He struggling to turn over Li Zhen's fingers, seeing that the location where he was scratched hadn't healed completely. Fang He's whole cat was stupid for a while, and his tears almost fell out. The virus invaded from this place? Fang He whimpered. Although the time he had been in contact with Li Zhen was short, there was nothing to say that Li Zhen was good to him. To meet such a person was his luck after he reborn as a cat, but why should Li Zhen be so unlucky? Why this person got the virus because of him? Silly squatting next to Li Zhen, Fang He was at a loss. He was infected with the zombie virus. There was no reversal vaccine. He would only gradually lose his mind and become a monster who only knows cannibalism. But the person in front of him is so good, how can he become that kind of monster? Fang He's cat's paw wrapped in white gauze was placed on Li Zhen's neck. Should we kill him at this time? As soon as Fang He's thought came up, a sour taste came to his heart, and the cat's paw covered his face. This was the only person in the world who was kind to him, how could he be willing? A ghostly messenger, Fang He leaned forward, and the cat's head was placed in Li Zhen's neck and gently rubbed against Li Zhen's neck. If this person becomes a zombie, then change it. The big deal is after he completely loses his mind. He thinks of a way to leave here. Li Zhen was itchy by Fang He's fluffy head, and opened his eyes slightly. He meow. Meow. Fang He still rubbed, applying a little force. Li Zhen's head was tilted. Li Zhen laughed in a daze. He stretched out his hand and rubbed Fang He's stomach. Fang He's movements stopped. He raised his head and looked at Li Zhen. Li Zhen opened his eyes slightly to look at him. He said in a low voice, "Don't want to sleep? Just ran away. The long way, go to sleep." After Li Zhen finished speaking, he moved his head slightly and touched Fang He's head with his forehead. Seeing Li Zhen's eyes, Fang He suddenly felt a little more hopeful. Li Zhen's eyes had not changed, they were still deep and sharp black and white, without turning red. Is the time still not up, or is he just wrong? Staring hard at Li Zhen's face for a while, Fang He stood up suddenly, ran outside, looked around and didn't find a small mirror. Fang He ran back to the bedroom again. Li Zhen had already sat up. Fang He rubbed Li Zhen's leg hard, the cat's mouth bit Li Zhen's pants and pulled him towards the bathroom. Fang He's various behaviors have long convinced Li Zhen that his Hemiao is definitely not an ordinary cat, so Li Zhen understood Fang He's meaning without any accident. Follow Fang He in the direction he instructed. When he walked to the bathroom, Fang He rushed to the washing table, pointed the cat's paw at the mirror, and screamed vigorously. Li Zhen looked in the mirror and immediately noticed something was wrong. His face was pale and sullen, definitely not what a normal person should have. Li Zhen lowered his head and glanced at his hands and arms, pressed hard, and his eyebrows tightened. Suddenly thinking of something, he turned and walked out of the bathroom and walked to another corridor in the room. Fang He jumped off the washstand, ignoring the pain of the cat's paw and chased him up. When he saw that the grey wallpaper suddenly opened a door, he was silly for a while and ran over to see that the room behind the door was not small, but it was not much different from the room where Li Zhen lived. It seemed that Li Zhen was at the same time. I bought 2 adjacent houses, punched through the wall in the middle, and then arranged this one here to look in front of me. Fang He stood stiffly at the door, and the equipment inside made him a little bit uneasy. In the laboratory he was sold to, there were many kinds of similar precision instruments. Li Zhen hurriedly washed his arm, took out a tube of blood, and put the blood into a special testing device. When Li Zhen looked up, he saw Fang He squatting at the door and beckoned. Fang He hesitated for a while and walked over slowly. Li Zhen stretched out his hand to pick up the kitten on the ground, and sat on the seat, unconsciously running his hand along the fur on Fang He's back.